In this video, I'm going to teach you how to get bigger arms as a drug-free lifter. And you should follow my advice because I'm a torso dominant lifter with really bad arm genetics. And if I was able to bring them up, you can definitely do so as well. And by the way, the ultimate proof that my arms got bigger is that this slingshot does not fit anymore. This is the large slingshot. I can't roll it up. I'm probably gonna have to buy a new one. I'm probably gonna have to buy the XL or something. It does not fucking fit. I've never washed it, so it has nothing to do with shrinking. It does not fucking fit on my arms. And when I'm pumped up in the gym, it's very, very, very hard to get on. Sometimes I need my friend to pull it up for me. So just the fact that the slingshot is tight as hell, that's proof that my arms got bigger, and therefore you should listen to this advice. And the way that I brought them up, well, let's talk about that right now. First of all, bench press training with emphasis on overloads. This is something that few guys do in their training, but I believe it can make all the difference. You see, don't just restrict yourself to the classic bench press. In fact, it's a great idea to incorporate things like bands, chains, slingshot, and even pin presses. Why? Well, it accommodates a strength curve. It changes the way the lift is so that it is heavier at the top. And when you get a weight moving off your chest, the middle to the top is mainly tricep power. So if you can overload your triceps with extreme lockout work, I believe your arms will get bigger. And that's what I've been experiencing personally because I train very west side-ish, and my arms just keep getting bigger and bigger because my bench press is increasing with these special exercises. So my first advice is to use overloads. Now, it's not the same concept as a rack pull above the knee. Rack pulls has to do with weighted stretching on the traps, but you're still putting your arms through extreme loads, you know? And I believe that's one of the fundamental reasons why so many geared powerlifters have huge triceps, but not the biggest pecs. That's because they do a lot of these overloads and they get out of the bottom position, which is the most difficult part for most raw lifters. So if you can overcome that with the usage of bands, chains, pin press, and things of that nature, I think you will greatly benefit from it. And in terms of the band tensions, mini bands, monster mini bands, lights, and get about 40 to 80 pound chain, okay? In addition to the presses, I would also recommend that you do very high volume training. High volume presses and high volume isolation work, although I'll talk a little about that later, okay? For the volume work, choose about 3 to 4 different presses per session and make sure that you're doing no less than 3 sets for that exercise. I personally recommend 5 sets or more. And don't just restrict yourself to 8 to 12 reps either. You want to do things like reps of 15, reps of 20, even reps of 30. These things will make your training a little bit more different and get some nice volume in your training. And the way that I personally do this is with concurrent periodization. As you all know, I have an intensity day and a volume day. I just rotate the exercises and then I vary the sets and reps. But I'm always making sure to have high volume. High volume is the most important thing when trying to build your bigger arms, right? If you just rely on basic ass shit, 3 sets of 8 to 12 with maybe a curl thrown in at the end of your workout, it's not going to work. And that's going to bring me on to my next point. You want to isolate your fucking arms. If you don't isolate your arms, you're leaving out all kinds of gains on the table, okay? Isolation work is absolutely key. You see, I've seen tons of powerlifters who they just practice the bench press so many times. They do Bulgarian systems, linear periodization systems, undulating. And basically what happens is that the bench press becomes a skill. They become so proficient at benching that the strength that they gain is unproportional to the size, right? And I believe that this can be remedied if you start training a little bit more like a bodybuilder. Now, I'm not saying you have to become a bro. I'm not saying you even require an arm day. I personally do not use arm days. However, do incorporate isolation work. Don't just rely on rows and chin-ups to build your biceps. Don't just rely on the close grip bench to build your triceps. Incorporate things like the tricep push down. Do extensions with dumbbells, barbells, and cables, whatever you prefer. And of course, do some curls. Curls for the girls, man, that's what you have to do. You need to curl if you want to maximize your bicep development. Bottom line, especially if you're a torso dominant lifter. Listen, if your chest takes over when you bench press, you have to isolate your arms. Bottom line. And if you row and you just feel it in your back and you never feel your biceps working, you have to do some fucking curls. Same thing for weighted chin-ups. If you do chin-ups and your back gets huge, but not your buys, you have to isolate your biceps. Let's stop looking at extreme examples of gymnasts and guys who are on a bunch of gear. Let's look at real natural lifters who are trying to maximize their potential. In that case, you need to isolate your fucking arms. And when you isolate your triceps, you want to make sure that you're hitting the long head. Why? Because the long head is the greatest part of the tricep. It's the mass portion on the back of your arm. This way, when you turn sideways, you got that big pop. When you turn around, you see the long head of your triceps. A good example of someone who has a developed long head would be C.T. Fletcher. C.T. Fletcher does not have the widest back, the thickest back per se, but when he turns around, you can see that long head sticking out. So you want to work your long head thoroughly. That's my number one recommendation when doing any type of extension, even push downs for that matter. When you do extensions, do it behind the head or incorporate shoulder flexion, okay? So at the bottom, do this little motion right here. This motion right here, and then you rotate, okay? Don't just have your elbows perfectly stationary. No, you want to use shoulder flexion to activate the long head of the triceps. That's why things like pullovers are so effective. That's why when you do a pullover for your chest or your lats, your long head of the triceps will get indirectly sore from doing so. So you need to isolate your triceps, and that must come in the form of direct long head work. Now, there's several movements you could do. The overhead extension is one of my favorites. The cable rope extension is fantastic, even done with a standard V-bar attachment. Any long head exercise will do, but make sure that you're incorporating the long head work because it's also a form of weighted stretching. And weighted stretching is my next point. As we all know, weighted stretching has been shown to be extremely effective for building mass in several movements, right? For the chest, we know that if you do a lot of weighted dips, you will see significant hypertrophy gain. If you couple that with dumbbell flies, again, we've seen great gains from doing that. For the lats, the weighted pull-up. Lots of guys benefit from this lift because of the weighted stretch at the bottom. The rack pull above the knee. Weighted stretch builds your traps. Pretty much every mass building exercise that is the best incorporates weighted stretching. And yes, weighted stretching is supported by exercise science, just so you know. We've seen studies where one calf was stretched for several weeks and hypertrophy occurred in that single calf with zero concentric work. We've also observed in bird studies over 300% hypertrophy gain, the largest hypertrophy ever seen in a study. Now, I understand people are going to say, oh, it's birds or whatever, but you know what? If we know that the anecdote supports weighted stretching, we've seen all the best mass builders or weighted stretching movements, and then we have these compelling studies that demonstrate that there might be some possible merit to incorporating it, then I would do so. And don't just wait for the science to come out, because it will come out eventually, just like it's coming out right now with the calves and all these things. I'm telling you, eventually you're going to learn that weighted stretching was the key to getting jacked, and you're going to regret that you didn't do it earlier. So do weighted stretching. When you do extensions, feel free to use a bit of leg drive to get heavier weights and maximize the eccentric. When you do your curls, make sure it's a deep range of motion with a nice stretch. That's why I personally recommend the preacher curl and the incline curl. Preacher curl, very, very good range of motion. You get a nice stretch on the biceps. Incline curl, same thing. You get a beautiful stretch at the bottom. That's what you want to incorporate. And on top of that, if you want to make your training a little bit more intense, and this is something that I've been doing personally, after your sets are done of the weighted stretching, you're going to stretch out your arms. And the way that I do this is I place two arms behind me against two little objects that I could grab onto, and I just stretch. I stretch my biceps, it simultaneously stretches the triceps. I believe a lot of gymnasts do this as mobility work. So this will further enhance your posture while building your arms at the same time. So incorporate weighted stretching and do a shitload of isolation work. Personally, I perform over 300 push downs every single session. Over 300. So that'll typically be a V-bar push down, a rope push down, maybe an underhand push down or a wide grip, maybe some pullovers as well to complement it. But I like doing a lot of push downs. 4 sets of 25, 3 sets of 33, 5 sets of 15, 5 sets of 20, things of that nature. Just blast your arms, pump them. You want to feel the pump. You want to get out of the gym with your arms looking at least an inch bigger. You want to be pumped every single time you train those guns. You want your biceps and triceps pumped. And at the same time, progressive overload must take place on the overloading exercises that I described at the beginning of this video. When you add up all these factors, you have an amazing system for building big arms as a drug-free lifter. And if I can give you one final recommendation, it would be to incorporate arm feeders or connective tissue training at home. This is where you take a band, place it on top of your doorway, and you perform tricep pushdowns and band curls. If you do this for very, very high volume every single day or every 24 to 48 hours, it will complement your training and it will act as a form of nucleus overload. By increasing the nuclei in your muscle cells, it will be easier to develop them in the near future. So I would strongly recommend that at home, you do some band pushdowns, do some band curls. Best part of doing this is that it will actually enhance your recovery. This way, you acquire greater work capacity, less elbow pain, and you can bench more in a safe fashion. So there you have it, folks. This is how your boy built up his bigger arms. I incorporated overloading exercises, a shitload of isolation work, lots and lots of volume, probably quadruple the regular amount. and I use weighted stretching principles and arm feeders. And I believe that if you follow all these strategies, you will too acquire amazing muscle gains in your arms. Anyway, hope you benefited from this video. Isolate your arms, shitload of volume, shitload of exercises, get stronger at the overloading movements, and do all the good things that I talked about. So, give me your feedback down below. What additional tips you have for guys trying to build up their arms without drugs? And with that, I will talk to you all next time.